Thank you, Clodagh. 10 to 9. Now, when you're flying, do you dread that illuminated seatbelt sign and high-pitched ping signalling the turbulence is about to liven up your journey?
That was my lunch.
Oh, no. Turbulence usually passes with no more than mild discomfort, but as we saw at Shannon a few weeks ago, it can prove more serious. Unfortunately, according to climate scientists, it's going to become a lot worse. Dr. Paul Williams from the University of Reading is with us. This is not good news, Paul. What's the evidence that things are going to get worse?
Yeah, it's pretty bad news, especially if you're a nervous flyer, and we know that maybe 20 to 30% of people are afraid of flying, and turbulence will, of course, be right at the top of their list, I would think, of fears. The evidence is, well, the reason it's happening is, of course, that the carbon dioxide that we're putting into the atmosphere is changing the temperatures. That's widely accepted and we all know about that. But in fact, the climate is changing not just at ground level where we live, it's also changing higher up in the atmosphere too. And those temperature changes at 35,000 feet are driving the atmospheric winds and driving them to be stronger. And I'm talking now about the jet stream, and it's instabilities within the jet stream that cause what we call clear air turbulence. So the link is the carbon dioxide changes the temperatures change the winds, and the winds generate more turbulence.
And when you say it's going to be a lot worse, the amount of it could double within the next 30 years?
Yes. Looking historically, we know that there's already been a 5 times increase in the number of serious injuries caused by turbulence since 1980. Now, a large part of that increase is explained by the simple fact that there are just more of us flying now than there were in 1980. But even after you correct the facts and the figures and the statistics to account for the growth in air travel, there has still been something like a 100% increase in the number of passengers injured since 1980. And the study that we've published looking into the future using a climate model simulation finds that the intensity of the turbulence could increase by up to 40%. So the scientific evidence is building, really, that turbulence is getting stronger, more intense because of climate change.
So could airlines not just simply change the flight path, go around the jet stream?
They have some degree of freedom to do that. Unfortunately, the price that you pay usually for diverting around turbulence is that the journey takes longer, the arrival is late, and crucially more fuel has been burnt to keep the plane in the air for longer, and that of course has a cost implication associated with it. There is some experimental technology coming online potentially soon, which, believe it or not, involves shining an ultraviolet laser out of the front of the plane and looking at the reflected ultraviolet light. And by analysing that reflected light, it's possible to detect invisible density perturbations ahead of the plane that are indicative of clear air turbulence. And I've seen some early results from these test flights, and there is quite some promise there. So it could be that if this technology gets rolled out across fleet of aircraft, that we could see clear air turbulence encounters consigned really to the history bins, and many nervous passengers would be very pleased about that, I think.
Well, is it possible that, given how fickle this jet stream can be, that you're wrong, that it won't be as bad as all of that, and it might sink further south perhaps than you've anticipated?
It's always possible in science that that we're wrong. What all we can do in science is say that the best scientific evidence that we have today is pointing to a certain conclusion, and science is constantly rewriting itself, correcting itself. That's the great thing about science. It's self-correcting. Any scientific errors will eventually be found out. So in principle, yes, but what I would say is that we understand physically very well now what drives the jet stream, and we understand the mechanisms, the dynamical and physical mechanisms that are causing it to speed up. So it seems unlikely at this stage that this could be wrong. But as I say, I wouldn't rule it out.
In the meantime, practice the brace position. Dr. Paul Williams, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Indeed, 6 minutes to 9.